Hey, it's Ben with the DIY Homefront, and it's spring here, which means it's time to do some of those spring cleaning things. And one of them is looking over all the patio furniture and deciding if anything needs any maintenance. And this year, it turned out there are some things. We've got 2 benches that the paint's flaking off and 2 chairs we bought a year ago that look like they need to have a coat of paint put on them. So, let's get into it. So this is where I'm going to do the pressure washing, and I have brought a rug out here. All right, off to get the benches.
This bench is normally in the shade all year long because it's up against the house, and the paint sticks to it fairly well. The second bench is also made out of aluminum, but it is in direct sunlight most of the day, and the paint is really flaking off of it. This wrought iron chair is fairly rusted, and this aluminum end table has a bunch of stuff splattered on it.
This is the bench that's underneath the eave of the house, and it's not bad at all. It's got some mildew, and it's got a couple spots where the paint's flaking off, but not many. So it's not in bad shape at all. This bench sits in full sun and is out farther on the deck, and you can see how the paint is flaking off all over the place. And this table and this chair got something on them. I have no idea what. I think my most logical choice was something ended up in the fire that shouldn't and blew up.
I've got a mid-range Craftsman pressure washer. Sometimes it sputters when you first hook it up until the air is out of the lines, but it does a really good job.
There's little assembly required on the pressure washer.
Double check and clean all the connections. You'll want to make sure the O-rings are in good shape. We're going to attach the trigger to the high pressure hose, and then we'll attach the wand to the trigger, and then we'll attach the high pressure hose to the pressure washer, followed by the water inlet hose.
Okay. Plenty of oil. The last little bit is to put in
a 15-degree spray pattern tip.
So once I get this started up, it's going to be awful noisy. And it shouldn't be too hard to start. I've never had a hard time in the past. And I'll start with one of the benches and film some of that.
So let's get the pressure washing started. You're going to need to hold the tip probably 6 to 12 inches away from the surface. And you're going to need to get every square inch. You'll need to get the top, the bottom. Listen to the pressure washer. You can hear when some air gets in the line and ends up in the pump. I never stop pulling the trigger. You just have to wait for the air to work through the system. I always put a rug down and pressure wash on that, so that way the pressure washer doesn't kick up dirt. The underside and the legs is where most of your mildew is going to be, so make sure you clean those really well too. I had to work awful hard on this second bench, getting all the loose paint off the sitting area.
Okay, everything's been pressure washed, so let's take a look at the pieces individually. Here's the bench that was in the sun all the time, and you can see the back. It's not too bad. You can see where the pressure washer blasted most of the old paint and some of the original paint off. But the part where you sit, it is really bad. This would be where the moisture and stuff sort of got through the paint. The only thing I can assume is that it's in the sun and aluminum expands and contracts, and that over the years it has sort of lifted the paint off of it. This is the bench that's in the shade, and you can see it's like the other one. You can tell where the last time I painted it, a lot of the paint came off, but hardly any, if anywhere, is there any large chunks of paint. And I bought these chairs about a year ago, and I'm glad I pressure washed them, because you can see we're starting to get some of the rust that's starting to come through. I can never understand why they do a flat finish. But I will get both of these. That's one that had something splattered on it. And you can see like the seat. You can really see where it's really starting to rust. So it's a good thing we got to this one when we did. So I'm going to lightly sand these.
So I have 2 aluminum benches and 1 aluminum end table. And although they don't rust, they still corrode. And you need to make sure you sand all the corrosion and get it back to, for lack of better word, bare metal before you paint it, or the paint's really just not going to stick. Now I'm doing the same thing to all of these. First I'm taking an orbital sander and hitting all the flat areas, and then I'm going back with sandpaper and getting all the interior grooves, the ends, the places that the sander couldn't get to. And the reason you want to do this is so that all the surfaces are cleaned and scuffed up. So that way when you put the paint on the benches and chairs, that the paint really does stick. There are no shortcuts. If you're going to go through all this work to paint it, you might as well do the extra effort, because you don't want 6 months or a year from now to all the paint be flaking back off again. That would defeat the purpose. Once I've sanded these 2 wrought iron chairs, I'll use the wire wheel to finish removing any rust. I've got about a 3-inch wire wheel that I have put in my drill, and I just use that to go over any spots of rust that I want to knock off. As simple as that. And then it's ready to paint.
All right, those are all sanded. Next thing to do is to take a break and put some stuff away and get some paint out.
So I normally start painting on the bottom and then work around the sides and the top and do the legs last. Unfortunately, I don't have any footage of me painting the 2 benches and the 2 chairs, but since I'm going to put a second coat on it, we'll see it then.
I had good luck. Well, I shouldn't say I had good luck. I spent a lot of time yesterday and I got all of these painted, but I'm not pleased with the way they turned out. The first chair I did turned out pretty good, and it's nice and glossy. The second chair started to have some runs and dips. By the time I got to the bench, we're looking pretty poor, and the final bench is looking flat. Can you see how dull that is? Now I knew I was going to have to put 2 coats of paint on these. So let's check out the cause of that problem. And 1 gallon of this at my local Ace Hardware store was $54, so I try not to waste any. I had a can that had some in it, not much, and that's what I was using yesterday. And I poured some of my new can into it, and I thought I got it stirred up, but I must not have. So as I use this, I started out with about a half a can, and as I worked my way down, I got closer and closer to the bottom. So the very beginning of the can was the planter stands that turned out glossy, and by the time I got to the bottom of the can, that was the benches that were flat. So I was actually hitting the bottom with my paintbrush by the time I got to the bottom. I didn't have this stirred up all the way.
The flat finish
is caused by all the sediments and stuff like that in the paint that have sat there over time. So today, I'm going to go with that new can, and I'm going to get my electric drill with the paddle, and I'm going to mix this stuff up like there's no tomorrow to make sure that I get a glossy coat on everything, because it's actually quite a bit of work to paint those things. I did 2 benches, 2 chairs, 2 planter stands, and one small table, and I started at 3 and I ended at 6:30. So it took me 3.5 hours to paint those. So I don't want to have to do another 3.5 hours after this coat because they're flat. So anyway, I'm going to get my electric drill out and take care of this. This makes it a lot easier to seal the paint can when you keep the edge clean. That's what a paint stirrer looks like.
I mixed this probably about 2 minutes before I thought about adding the rest of that other paint can.
I am going to go ahead and pour this in here.
And I mixed it again for about 2 more minutes.
Be careful about pulling this thing up too quick. You'll sling paint everywhere.
So this is a trick I learned. If you put your finger on the shaft as you're pulling the mixture out, it'll keep the paint from splattering everywhere.
So paint thinner really does take the paint off. I'm not sure exactly why it has to have acetone to thin it, but it definitely takes the paint off. I'm just trying to get as much of this paint off of this as I can. I threw away my brush yesterday because it was wore out and tired, so I bought a new one. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put this on the table for painting, and then I'm going to get to it.
All right, we're going to be moving pretty fast because I'm filming in the hyperlapse mode. So on the chair, that wire mesh is really hard to paint if the chair is sitting upright. But if you lean it on its side, you can really glob the paint on. And as it drips down towards the ground, it just keeps going to the next section. So you just have to go back and forth from the front to the back to get all your drips. Other than that, it's just all the normal things. Put the paint on thick, smooth it out, look for drips or runs, and make sure you hit everything. I'm only showing painting one chair, just like I'm only going to show painting one bench. Now for the bench, it's just like the chair. Put it on its side, start at its highest point, work your way down, putting the paint on thick, rotating from the front and back, and checking for all your drips or runs. And then once you've got the two surfaces, the seat and the back done, you can put it upright and work on the sides and the legs. Now this oil-based paint will stay tackier and takes longer to dry than latex. But we're outside and we're putting these in the sun to dry, and it's not going to take any time at all. I usually like to give these about a day or two before I sit on them or use them to give the paint a good chance to really harden up. We didn't prime these pieces, and one of the reasons why I wasn't worried about that is because of this oil-based paint. When you put a coat of latex paint on bare metal, you can actually start the rusting process right then and there. Like a latex that has water in it, but oil-based paint does not do that. It doesn't oxidize the aluminum or the wrought iron.
And the bench, everything looks really, really good. Mixing that paint up with the electric drill and that paddle was the way to go.
So both my wife and I kept adding to the list of things we were going to paint. So I will make another video that covers all of her gardening stuff and another one that covers the additional outdoor furniture.
So it's been like 3 days here and it's pollen season, and you can see how much is already built up on this. And last but not least, one of the two benches also covered with pollen. Well, if I had one last parting thought before I wrap this one up, it would be that spray paint's a little bit easier and might be faster, and you get a better finish. It's going to be smoother. But we are talking about outdoor furniture. And you can see after 3 days, it really wouldn't make a difference if the paint was smooth or not. It's going to be covered with pollen, it's going to rain, it's going to end up getting a little bit of mold and mildew on it. So in the long run, I think you're better off using a paintbrush and paint. You're going to get better coverage, you're going to get all the spots, you're not going to miss anything, you don't have to worry about overspray. Just my opinion. I still have 2 more videos coming from this. Once I got the pressure washer out and got started, my wife gave me some things that she wanted me to touch up, and I found some other furniture that probably needed a coat of paint too. So I'll try to get those out in the next couple days. Until then, like, subscribe, check out the playlist, and I'll see you in one of those videos.